In the mangroves along the Mekong, a Viet Cong squad watched a small American boat idle down the river. Fiberglass hull, no armor, 4 men aboard. To the men in the tree line, it was a sitting duck. And they were right about the boat. It could not take a hit. A rifle round would punch clean through one side and out the other. So they opened fire. The boat did not run. It did not sink. It pivoted in its own length, swung its twin 50 caliber machine guns onto the bank, and tore the ambush apart in seconds. That was the lesson the Delta taught, over and over, until it hardened into something close to a rule. You did not ambush a river patrol boat. Not because the boat was bulletproof, because of what it did the instant you pulled the trigger. In the rivers of South Vietnam, springing an ambush on a PBR was not a tactical strike. It was suicide. By 1965, the Mekong Delta did not answer to Saigon. It answered to the Viet Cong. The Delta was water before it was land.
Thousands of miles of river, canal, and mangrove, a flooded maze where the rice paddies ran to the horizon, and every mile of that water was a road. The enemy moved everything along it: rice, weapons, tax collectors, whole battalions, ferried bank to bank by sampan and junk through channels too shallow and too tight for any ocean-going warship to follow. The Navy's first attempt to take the rivers back failed. In late 1965, it sent in armed landing craft, slow, heavy boats that could not catch a fleeing sampan and could not escape an ambush. They proved the rivers needed to be fought for. They could not do the fighting. Because the real problem was the ambush. A boat in a narrow channel runs on a fixed track. The Viet Cong learned to pick a bend in the river, dig into the bank vegetation at point-blank range, and wait. Small arms, recoilless rifles, rocket-propelled grenades. The first thing a crew knew of the trap was the water erupting around them. In late March 1966, the Navy pushed into the Rung Sat Special Zone, the Forest of Assassins, the Viet Cong swamp stronghold southeast of Saigon. Patrol craft and landing boats crawled through the muck while Army Huey gunships worked the tree line above them, flying off the deck of the USS Belle Grove, anchored in the river. It was a glimpse of the answer. Shallow water boats and guns in the air overhead on call. What the Navy still needed was the boat, something fast enough to chase the enemy into his own backyard and mean enough to turn his ambush into his grave. The boat they found did not start as a warship. It started as a pleasure craft. A fiberglass hull from a boatyard in Bellingham, Washington, the kind of thing built for a family on a lake. The Navy took that hull, dropped in 2 diesel engines, and bolted on a propulsion system with no propellers at all. Water jets. The same idea that drives a jet ski, sucking in river water and firing it out the back. That one choice changed everything. With no propellers to foul, the boat could run in 9 inches of water. It could skate over sandbars that grounded everything else. It could stop dead from full speed, reverse, and spin inside its own length. And it was fast, close to 30 knots, faster than anything the Viet Cong could put on the river. They called it the PBR, Patrol Boat River. The men who crewed it called it the pibber. For its size, it carried staggering firepower. Twin 50 caliber M2 Brownings in a rotating tub at the bow, a third 50 at the stern, M60 machine guns on the flanks, a hand-cranked Mark 18 grenade launcher amidships, lobbing 40mm rounds into the brush. What it did not carry was armor. Remember that. A 1/4 inch of steel around the helmsman, a little ceramic shielding on the gun tub, and nothing else. Bare fiberglass. The crews actually stripped what little protection they had to gain speed and a clear field of fire. The most feared boat in the Delta could be holed by a single rifle round. In May 1966, a bosun's mate first class named James Elliott Williams took command of PBR 105, River Squadron 5. He was a Korean War veteran, a hard, quiet South Carolinian who had run raiding parties off a destroyer a decade before. The fighting started almost at once. On the 1st of July, Williams chased a sampan through the pre-dawn dark,
took fire from boat and bank, used the pibber's speed to slip the trap, and killed 5 of the 9 men aboard before capturing the craft. On the 23rd, he did it again at night on the Quatiu River. In August, he ran 105 and a second boat through a gauntlet of nearly 100 enemy gun positions, was hit 4 separate times, took a wound to the face, and still dragged 71 classified enemy documents out of a sampan before he pulled out. 3 fights in 3 months. A pattern was forming.
The boat let 4 men attack into an ambush instead of dying in one. On the 31st of October 1966, James Williams expected a quiet day. October 31st, 1966 was supposed to be a restful day, he said later. A routine run down the Mekong near Mai To. Stop a few boats, check for contraband, go home. 2 sampans opened fire on his patrol. Williams returned fire, killed the crew of 1, and chased the second as it fled into a side channel. The sampan was bait. It led 105 and its partner boat straight into a hornet's nest. Heavy fire from fortified banks on both sides, and ahead of them, a fleet. 2 junks, 8 sampans, then more. Williams had blundered into a Viet Cong battalion in the middle of crossing the river. More than 80 vessels packed with enemy troops, 2 boats, 8 men, against a battalion. He did not pull back. He drove his 2 boats straight into the mass of enemy craft, twin 50s hammering, and called for the Sea Wolves, the Navy's helicopter gunships, on standby for exactly this. This is the part the Viet Cong never solved. A PBR ambush was not a fight against 4 men in a boat. It was a fight against 4 men in a boat, and then, within about 15 minutes, 2 helicopter gunships overhead, raking the bank. The boat's job was to survive the first volley and answer it. The Sea Wolves did the rest. They came over Williams that afternoon and claimed 16 enemy boats on their first major action of the war. The battle ran 3 hours. As the light failed, Williams did something close to insane. He switched on his searchlights. He lit himself up. A fiberglass boat with no armor, glowing in the dark on a river full of enemy guns, so the gunners overhead could see the targets he had found. By the most generous Navy estimates, enemy losses ran into the hundreds. The more careful accounts simply record the truth that matters. More than 50 vessels destroyed, the crossing shattered, a battalion broken by 2 boats and the guns they brought with them. Williams would receive the Medal of Honor. He remains the most decorated enlisted sailor in the history of the United States Navy. A rear admiral who commanded him in the Delta put it plainly. Williams never set out to be a hero. The time, the place, and the enemy made him one. And here is the thing about the boat under him. It had no business surviving that night. It was fragile. It was unarmored. It should have been a coffin. That was the point. The pibber lived through ambushes precisely because it was light and fast, because it could turn, accelerate, and pour out fire quicker than the enemy could adjust. Armor would have made it heavier, slower, easier to hit. The Navy did not protect the boat. It made the boat impossible to pin down. Williams was not finished. In January 1967, he led 3 PBRs against a force later assessed at 3 heavy weapons companies, some 400 men. He was wounded in the withdrawal and kept directing fire from the open deck. For that day, he received the Navy Cross. Days later, the same boat and the same crew showed the other half of who they were. Williams watched a dredge, the Jamaica Bay, strike a mine and begin to sink. He brought 105 alongside, pulled survivors from the water, then heard tapping inside the flooding hull. He went into the river. He dove again and again into the sinking wreck, cleared the pipes blocking a hatch, and dragged a trapped man out alive. The boat that erased a battalion also went into a sinking hull to save 1 civilian. And it was not only the Americans fighting this water. On the 4th of December 1971, in the U Minh Forest, an Australian pilot, Lieutenant Jim Buchanan, was lifting a wounded man off a government patrol boat under heavy fire. 50 yards away, a second patrol boat took a direct hit from a B-40 rocket and exploded. Buchanan's own boat went dead in the water, drifting toward the enemy bank. so he hooked his helicopter's skids onto the boat's superstructure and physically towed it to safety. Under automatic weapons fire and 82mm mortars the entire way. They gave him the Distinguished Flying Cross. The same Delta, the same ambush, the same refusal to leave a boat to die. By 1968, under Admiral Elmo Zumwalt, the Navy stopped waiting to be ambushed and took the offensive. Operation Sea Lord sent more than 200 boats driving up the canals toward the Cambodian border to choke the enemy's supply lines at the source. And the enemy learned. That is the clearest proof of what the pibber did. The Viet Cong had owned these rivers in daylight. Within a year of the PBR's arrival, they stopped trying. The standing bank ambush, the tactic that had ruled the Delta, became a losing trade against a boat that answered with twin 50s and brought helicopters in 15 minutes. So the enemy went underground. They moved at night, in smaller, scattered sampans hugging the edges. They traded the stand-up fight for the mine and the command-detonated charge. Kill the boat without ever facing it. They sent swimmers and sappers against the anchorages in the dark. That shift is the admission. The men who had ambushed everything that floated decided the river patrol boat was not worth ambushing. But this was never a one-sided war, and any version that tells you otherwise is lying to you. The PBR crews paid in blood. At the worst of it, the River Patrol Force ran a casualty rate near 6% a month, which meant a man could finish a one-year tour facing something close to a 3 in 4 chance of being killed or wounded. They became one of the most decorated commands of the entire war for a simple reason. The fighting was that bad, and the mine, in the end, was deadlier than any ambush. A boat's guns cannot answer a charge already sitting on the river bottom. The one thing the pibber could not outrun was the trap it never saw. Forget the movies, too. Apocalypse Now made the river patrol boat an icon of slow dread, drifting upriver into madness. The real pibber was the opposite of slow. Its signature was violence and speed. The snarl of the engines, the boat coming around hard, gone from the kill zone before the enemy could correct. Ask the men who crewed them what they remember, and most of them go to sound. The low, warm thrum of the diesels at idle, drifting on a black river at 2 in the morning. And then the noise that broke it. The buzzsaw roar of the twin 50s. Red tracers reaching for the bank. Green tracers reaching back. 2 medals of honor. 14 Navy crosses. From a handful of small boats and the men who refused to leave the water. It started as a pleasure craft. A fiberglass hull off a factory line, built for calm lakes and quiet weekends. No armor. Nothing that should have survived a war. The Viet Cong looked at that boat in the mangroves and saw a sitting duck. They were right about everything except the one thing that mattered. Its strength was never in what it could take. It was in what it could deliver, and how fast it could be gone.